music inherently reinforces who we are.
Spotify reported that over 100,000 new songs are uploaded every day, yet the average listener sticks to just a few playlists that they repeat endlessly. Why do some songs literally give us the chills?
Humans always want to predict things. They want to predict their environment, right? If I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, it makes me uneasy, right? But if I can predict something, I'm a little more comfortable. So it's a rhythm that's predictable, which is what music is. You know, it's a rhythm that you feel and you can be like, and boom, right? You know when the drop is coming. Our brainwaves are syncing, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, even from that perspective, it's like, oh, that's really interesting and very cool. Like,
sounds like a really bro way of talking about it.
Yeah.
Bro, it's syncing.
It's crazy, man.
Today, we're gonna get really deep into why certain songs hit harder than the rest and how sound is gonna rewire the mind. Welcome to the podcast, Daniel.
Thank you.
So what's the story? Why do you like music?
Oof. Oh, that's a place to start. It's just something that caught my soul, man. You know, music was always an outlet. It was always something that I think gave me an avenue of expression. Mm-hmm. You know, so it was just like, it was something, I mean, I had a lot of angst, I think, when I was younger as well. So music is just something that was a good way for me to let out emotion, express emotion, and it was also something to kind of grow with. I don't think I saw that at the time of starting to play music, but definitely it was something that became a tool of growth and a kind of like analogy for life, because it was like, this is something I enjoy, this is something I want to commit myself to, so therefore like you'll see your progress in it, and then you kind of implicitly understand how growth is possible. It's like if you apply yourself, you'll get better at it, you know what I mean? So it's really cool having that passion for something. But yeah, music just struck me. You know, anything that was heavy, that was cool, that was groovy, it just I felt it in my bones, you know, and I couldn't not get involved with it, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
One quick question before we even get into everything we're talking about today. How many times do people confuse you for a musician? And how many times do people think that, oh, he's a musician, but no, he's actually a professor?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is having long hair, you know, I mean, when I let this down, you know, it's quite a stage prop. So people immediately like, that guy plays music. Like, you know what I mean? Like when you're walking with the hair down and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's a mixed bag. It's funny because a lot of times it took some time. I mean, I'm in my 5th year now teaching. But it took times for my friend group to find out about, oh, you do that? Like, that's crazy. And then people would kind of find out, and then we'd be just hanging out outside a gig. And the people were like, you know, he's a professor, right? You know,
right.
And so then it kind of interceded, and then I started, you know, leading my own workshops. I do the holistic psychology workshops that are really, really interesting. Again, merging like psychology, neuroscience, Eastern philosophy into like one big like understanding of the self. So I started to push that to the public through my own channels and stuff like that, growing that and bringing that out. And then that's when a lot of people just found out, like this, they follow me on Instagram. I meet somebody at a gig, you know what I mean? And they'd be like, oh, you do psychology stuff, right? You know, and it was fun. But yeah, it's vice versa. I mean, I keep, honestly, my professional life with the teaching, I do kind of keep it a little bit separate. Like none of my students know that I'm like a rock star at night. Like, you know what I mean?
I'm sure they'll look at you and think of that. Like, you're the cool professor that they had in college.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting. So Spotify reported that over 100,000 new songs are uploaded every day. Yet the average listener sticks to just a few playlists that they repeat endlessly. Why do some songs literally give us the chills and they make us move? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, that's 3 different questions there, right? But I think in terms of people who, you know, listen to the same sort of playlists, music inherently reinforces who we are. On a psychological level, we really look at music. It helps us to, again, as I was mentioning before, express emotion, to identify with things, even to enhance or reinforce our mood. You know, if I'm feeling a certain type of way, if I'm feeling upset, I might play a song that like helps me grieve. Or if I want to alter my mood, you know, I might go to a song, obviously a song I know, because it's, you know, music becomes a tool in this way, right? But if I'm about to go to the gym or I need to get hyped or I need to do something, I'll put on a song that I know is going to boost my mood. Right. And there's endless amounts of studies, like performance is literally better when people listen to music, like power output and like all sort of energy output. When you have music on, it really does amp you up. But in terms of like music perception in a general sense, it's really, really complicated. Music lights up the brain globally. So much of your brain is involved with music. Obviously, auditory perception is happening. You have, if you're dancing, if you're moving, it's the motor cortex, right?
Right.
People who are really good dancers have a very high degree of connection and synergy between the motor cortex and the auditory cortex.
What is that?
So the motor cortex would be movement, motor function, movement,
Right.
right? So when you hear a noise and a sound, you're translating that into motion, right? So the signal that's coming into the auditory cortex has to be sent and has to communicate to the motor area of the brain, right? So that signal
just
needs
to interrupt you,
connect.
The cortex, what does it mean? Like, is it part of the
Oh,
brain?
yeah, the cortex is just the surface of the brain. So
Oh,
just
okay.
a small breakdown is like you have your spine and you have your brain stem, right? Your brain stem is literally coming out of your spinal cord. Your brain gets a little bit bigger and there's the brain stem, right? And the brain stem is kind of just like the root of the brain. Then it goes to the top of the brain stem, which you have kind of the core of the brain, which is
Okay.
called the thalamus. So
Right.
the brain stem, you have the thalamus, and then over top of that is like the wrinkly foldy area. And that's the cortex,
Okay.
right? And that cortex is where essentially like most of conscious action, volition, and thought happens in the cortex,
All right.
right? When you have instinctual responses to things, that's the brainstem, right? So there's different areas of the brain. Again, with music in particular, it will activate the brainstem.
Right.
Two of the fundamental fears of human beings are the fear of heights, or instinctual, the fear of heights and the fear of loud noise, right? So loud noise excites the nervous system. It
Right.
makes you boom, 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 right? But if it has a predictive nature, all of a sudden now higher parts of, into the brainstem, into the midbrain, right, getting towards that core of the brain, you have areas like the nucleus accumbens, the ventral tegmental area. These areas of the brain are involved in like prediction. And it's interesting because these areas of the brain, like if you have a rhythm or a beat, right. That's like predictable but a little different. It's like boom, boom, bata, boom, bata, boom, boom, bata. If there's little things that like, oh, you didn't expect that, that area of the brain, the nucleus accumbens in the brainstem actually lights up and it feeds into the cortex. So it actually excites the brain, right? That predictive nature really helps us rhythmically lock, or what we call phase lock, in terms of understanding it. And then the predictive nature, then all of a sudden we get to predict it, we can move with it, we can find synergy with it, right? And then all of a sudden is now a huge dopamine hit, right? That we're able to predict things because on a kind of unconscious level, humans always want to predict things. They want to predict their environment, right? If I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, it makes me uneasy, right? But if I can predict something, I'm a little more comfortable. So if it's a rhythm that's predictable, which is what music is, it's a rhythm that you feel and you can be like, and boom, right? You know when the drop is coming kind of thing, right? So because of that, it gives us this kind of comfortability, familiarity, falls in line. And then, so the brainstem is involved, the auditory cortex, right? The motor cortex if you're moving, and then the emotional centers of the brain, right? Which are hugely connected to psychology, identity, and just motivation, energy, all those sorts of things, right, are involved in that. So it's very deep. And I don't know if you want to segue at this point, but
no, it's interesting what you said, and I'm really like, I'm the kind of person who needs music everywhere. Like I go to the gym, I need music. I go for a walk, I need music, or maybe like a podcast playing, and I think like there's this sense of like when I said that, I asked you like what gives us the chill, and I feel like it draws me back to some sort of a moment. Like yesterday itself, like I was out on a run on the East River and I was listening to, have you heard of that song Danger Zone by Kenny Loggins?
I think so.
The one in Top Gun?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So that instantly
Danger Zone.
Exactly, that's the one.
Yeah.
And it came on the whole, I think it was a playlist or some recommendation. And the minute it came, I was just taken back to that movie moment where the whole planes are flying, they're crashing through, and the whole movement.
The rush of adrenaline comes in. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is that though? Like, why does that happen?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it's what we call episodic memory, right? So it's memory of moments. Like think about like on today's episode, right? So episodic memory is a memory of events, which is in your temporal lobe, which is on the side of the brain, right? Near your temples. Which is also very close to the auditory cortex. All memory and recognition and things are happening there in the temporal lobe. So because of the proximity of those two areas, right, you have connection. But also, again, what's really interesting is that because music is emotional, right, it has an emotional counterpart to it.
Right.
It also has a higher degree of imprinting into the brain. Right. So if we look at the anatomy of the brain, there's an area of the brain, and I'll get a little technical here, but there's an area of the brain called the hippocampus, and it's basically just the area that creates new memories and stores information. So the hippocampus is connected, that memory center is connected directly to something called the amygdala, which is really fires off in moments of high emotion. So because those two are very heavily connected, music is emotional. So because it's an emotional experience, it has a much higher probability of encoding into memory. And when we encode a memory, it's you want to look at memory as like it's a sensory impression, right? So it's something that is sensory, it's happening, right? Like if I'm like feeling good right now, I'm seeing your face, I'm associating this feeling with this moment, with you, with the podcast, with like these things. So everything will increase. But so now if all of a sudden now music is playing in that moment, right? And also just the facilitation of what music does with other people, if there's sound, if there's all sorts of things, now you're associating that music it's put into as part of the sensory impression. It's part of the landscape in that sense, right? So if I was looking at grass and the grass is green, right, the color green might remind me of the grass, right? So it's like one of those things where if the sound is playing, the noise is there, right, it's going to associate to what's happening around it. So that in that sense, right, there's a high degree of encoding or memory creation, right, in those moments.
So would you say like if there was no emotion associated with the music, it's not going to hit?
Yeah. I mean, if you ever heard a song that just didn't do it for you, did you remember that? You're not going to remember that
A lot
song.
of those songs. But then you don't remember it. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. Again, emotion really upticks the probability of something being encoded into the brain. But it's really interesting because, again, it's partly instinctual. Like our response to sound is instinctual. Again, that probability and predictability thing is happening. But also because it's emotional, like there's just so much more kind of juice, I would say. There's so much more energy, neurologically speaking, that's happening. It's very, as I said, instinctual, but also like it's really curious to know that music really has a strong hold in like the root of human evolution. The curious part is like science can, kind of derive the mechanism of saying like, okay, this is what's happening. These are the parts of the brain that are active, but why that happens is kind of a mystery still. So this is the interesting, science is really good at answering.
What part's the mystery?
So science is really good at answering how and the mechanism, like how something is happening, but why it happens is a very difficult thing.
Okay.
So in the sense of like, well, we know that again, the hippocampus, the amygdala, these areas of the brain for memory encoding, the auditory cortex, right, the rhythmic predictability, and we know where that's happening in the brain and like what's going on, but why music does that? Why does music activate emotion? We don't know. We just know it does.
Okay.
Right? So we can dissect that mechanism, but saying why, like for example, even again, just going back to the idea of human evolution, right? Why did humans just pick up drums and start banging on them and finding rhythms and moving and dancing? Like, why did we do that?
Right.
In some degree, it was a display, of like fitness, being able to dance and move. And if you could move real quick, right? And if you could predictively syncopate with music, right? It was a display, right? So it has a lot of roots. In terms of how and why it activates these emotional centers, it's very deep. I think it has a lot to do with maybe the foundation of language and our formation of language, our manipulation of sound. Even, there's a counterpart with language that's like pitch oriented, right? So if I say something like, or volume and pitch, or if I say it like this, right? If my pitch goes up, it's a question, or there's different inferences. So I think that sound implicitly or just organically had different degrees of inference, right? So if I made a low, doof, 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 or like the difference between like a grunt and a squeal, right? They imply different things evolutionarily speaking, right? So high pitched noises would give a different response in the body than a low sound, right? A low sound often means that it's a large resonating body, right? A high pitch sound, if you look at the voice of a child, it's at much higher pitch because it's a smaller resonating body. So there was inference by nature of what sound is, and then we started to manipulate that and play with that, and then that just derived. And again, every culture that has ever existed has always had some sort of tradition of music.
Right.
And it's, again, the question of why is really curious. That's when you start getting into the philosophy of it and like, why do humans do this? Where does that come from? And,
Right.
Some people will, well, God imbued them with that. And so other people will be like, well, it was an evolutionary mechanism in the formation of language. And again, this is the idea of approaching something from multiple perspectives, right? In nature of like, is it evolutionary? Is it divination? Is it just biology? So it's very hard to kind of decipher.
So
pick up.
You'd say that it's not only emotion.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's cognitive.
Right.
Also, it's again, the predictive nature of it. It's mathematics at the end of the day. Formalized real music is mathematics. For people who aren't musicians, right? You have the musical scale. You have do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? Mm-hmm. So there's 7 tones there, right? And that was broken up by the use of mathematics. It was the Greeks that created the 12-tone scale.
Right.
And from the first note, do to so, right? Those 2 notes have a geometric relationship with each other.
Right.
So every time that first note, do, vibrates twice in one span of space, the 5th note, so, will actually vibrate 3 times in that exact amount of space. So the perfect 2 to 3 ratio in the wavelength. So as the geometry in the perfect fifth sounds really good to the ear. It sounds pleasing. It sounds good, right? But it's derived from these mathematical formulas, right? So we, again, as we developed music, right, it started from grunts and squeals and syncopated rhythms and drumming, right, to orientation of pitch and understanding, differences of pitch, and then putting 2 pitches together. And these 2 sound good. This one doesn't, right? And it's the same thing of like, the experimentation with food. People used to make brews and they'd put this plant with that plant and see what happens. And we'll put this plant in and that one's tea. And this one, you put a dandelion in there and that helps my stomach, right? And it's natural experimentation of the human being that led to it becoming more complex, our understanding of it growing, and us directly manipulating it, and then us having fun with it.
No, that's it. Like I think whenever I'm listening to a new song, say, have you heard of the guy Fred again?
Yeah.
He's this DJ house guy.
Right.
So lately I've been getting into a lot of Fred again. And he drops his music, and I feel like there's some level of familiarity with that music because I've already listened to his music and that kind of music.
Right.
That's how I feel like a lot of people pick their genre, where they like rock. It gave them that feeling. Like every time I listen to music, I'm transported by it to some music video I saw, someone playing the guitar at this moment.
Right.
I feel like I'm the guy, or I'm this moments of conquering and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If it's a really heavy music, or if it's something on the emotional side where you're just sitting and feeling it. So that way I feel like music hits me a lot. But again, I want to come back to what you said earlier, the dopamine part of it. It starts we're all kind of cooked with the dopamine and everything, right? You feel that?
Supposedly, yeah. I think our understanding of dopamine is a little in the modern or in the regular sphere of we used to think it was the reward chemical,
right?
But it actually is more of an initiation chemical. When we have a thought that we want to do something, dopamine spikes even before we complete the action, right? So dopamine is a motivating chemical. So dopamine happens every time we kind of get motivated. Also, it's a retroactive reinforcer, which basically means if I do something, if I complete an action, if I pick up this cup and sip it, and it's ooh, that feels good. Now my brain will now reinforce the pattern of activity that got me to do that action. Right. So it's oh, I did a thing and then it felt good. So dopamine will now reinforce that whole, loop essentially.
Okay.
Right? So that happens a lot. But music, you mentioned with beats and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of biometric markers that happen. As well. So for example, house music and that sort of stuff, it mirrors natural rhythms. So
Right.
your heartbeat is like, 60 to, if you're exercising like vigorously, you can be like up to 160 or something like that. But
Right.
a lot of like EDM music uses around 120 BPM, which is 2 beats per second, which is an elevated heart rate.
Right.
So you go into the like,
Yeah.
and what happens is your body over time can naturally assimilate to those rhythms, right? So there's something called entrainment, right? Your body will start to be like, oh yeah, and you naturally just associate and kind of, I guess, get immersed in the environment,
So quick question, like
Mhm.
this I just thought of. If you're at like 80 BPM or something, right?
Mhm.
And like your heartbeat,
Right.
and you go to a place where it's like 120,
Mhm.
does your heart rate like increase
Yes.
with respect to
Yeah.
that?
And that's
You
also
synchronize?
yeah. Well, you can, and you might initially your heart rate will increase as an instinct.
Okay.
Right, again, because loud sound, right, again, as I said before, it's an instinct. So it's like, like you're reacting to that instinctually as an
Right.
animal, right? So you will instinctually increase your heart rate. If you enjoy that stimulus, you might allow that to happen. But you can also, if you're not in the mood or you don't like it, there can be resistance psychologically.
Okay.
And then that will kind of curve the biology's response to the stimuli. So the mind is kind of like the gate in that sense. It will allow us to synchronize or it won't, right? Based on our preference.
Okay. Well, it's
Yeah.
kind of cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the funny thing is preference is like right above your eyes. There's a part in your frontal lobe.
Okay.
Your frontal lobe kind of sticks out. Do we get the side view of my head? Right? It sticks out like this, right?
Yeah.
Your brain goes over your eyeballs and comes back up. So right above your eyes, the bottom part of your frontal lobe, it's called the orbital frontal cortex, and it actually has a lot to do with your preferences and your responses to certain stimuli, even like smells and tastes. Like if you're disgusted, it's that part of the brain, right? So it's frontal lobe, right? And our frontal lobe controls a lot of, kind of our conscious reasoning, what we call executive functioning, or like how we do things. Our personality, for the most part, is kind of, for lack of a better term, is stored right in the frontal lobe for the most part. So our preferences and how we like things. So that part of the brain can control, right, that level of assimilation, and it can control a lot of what we respond to, how we respond to things. And it's interesting. It's very interesting.
It is. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
Brain's kind of capable of a lot of things.
yeah. And it's interesting. We kind of sit on. They used to have this saying called the ghost in the machine, right? And this was this idea that like as material science kind of went forward, we ended up thinking like we kind of were trying to push away from the idea of soul, right? Because material science wanted to be like, no, it's all explainable here, right? So the soul was like the ghost in the machine, or again, that how mechanistic scientific view. It's like, well, where is the soul? Where is the center of being? And it's interesting because these parts of the frontal lobe end up modulating a lot of the responses we have later. But then the funny thing is determinism can come in and say that like, oh, well, you only think that way and have those preferences because of your family, your culture, or these things. So everything can kind of be traced back, and it's an endless argument whether it's deterministic or whether it's, but I think I'm kind of a little bit more towards the free will camp in terms of agency, in terms of like, if we so choose, right, we can literally alter our wiring of our brain, which is neuroplasticity, and we can even alter the expression of our genetics, which is epigenetics.
Right.
So there's all sorts of things that go into that. I think music is a huge tool for that too. Putting a certain song on, can literally change the functioning. It could change your chemistry in your body. You put on a song and you get adrenaline.
Right.
You know what I mean? You put on a song and it winds you down, right? It'll change your heart rate. It'll change your brainwave states. All sorts of stuff like that. It's phenomenal.
It is. Like, I love music. Like, if anyone's seen this.
Yeah, no, shout out to that tattoo, man. Very cool.
Hey there. Thank you so much for watching. I really love the work that I'm putting in for you guys. And it would mean the world for me if you could just hit that subscribe button. Back to the podcast. I was reading this statistic, and it's kind of oversimplified, but it says that the average hit song in 2025 gets to the chorus in under 20 seconds because how cooked the whole dopamine system is. And this is why I feel like modern pop is addictive to a lot of the younger generation. Like, I come from like a hybrid part of it, where like I love rock, and then there's like I'm on the fence with the modern pop thing, but people growing up now, in under 20 seconds, if we have the whole chorus, right, they're getting hooked to that song.
Yeah.
And is it because like is that I'm guessing it's because of our brains, but is it also because that they're engineering it that way?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely engineer songs to catch people,
Right.
and it's formulaic. You know, the chord structures that they use, the BPM again that they use. If we want this to be a dance song, 120 BPM, right? If we want a lifting sound, we're going to use like a major chord or something like that. If we want it to be dark and foreboding, we'll use a minor chord. Again, just simplifying it, but just different types of chords and notes that you play will influence mood. But in terms of the speed of it too, I mean, again, referencing the idea that music is kind of a tool, right? People want to play their song and they want to feel good, right? And they're on their way to work and they just got their coffee and they're getting in their car, they're getting on the subway and they're like, I'm going to put on this song and it's going to hit me, right? It's going to do the thing, right? And it's like, if I push play, do I have to wait like 4 minutes for the chorus to get me to go, right? It's like, I think it's kind of part of that instant gratification thing where it's like, I need the chorus. I need that now. I'm pushing play. I want this to happen.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that kind of little bit of instant gratification that's coming in, and people are engineering music to just hit those buttons in people, because if they can, right, again, as you said, the mood, the emotion, right, which will then encode in memory, right, and then you can engineer it. I mean, also look at how people have used music. If you want to do an experiment, put some really moody music right under what I'm saying right now.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, right, it's like, well, do you really feel that way? And, it'll completely change the atmosphere.
Right.
There's a couple like goofy things on like YouTube and stuff where you can watch like movies, but they'll put different music to it and how awkward it looks and how funny it is.
I've seen the Titanic scene where like everyone's like trying to get off the boat and it's all flipping. Someone put some Bollywood music into it. And it was really funny. Like the whole vibe of it completely changed.
Right. Yeah. So it's funny. I mean, again, we're hitting those base brain areas and we're just kind of like enforcing mood. It's like if it's elevated, if it's a fast tempo, it's going to get you going, right? If it's certain types of chords, it's going to induce emotion in you, right? So it's really curious, again, how you can literally just completely change a scene, right? By sound, manipulating sound. And what bugs me out, what I kind of like, if anything kept me up at night, it's the fact that like sound is a pressure wave moving through the air, right? But there's a fundamental physics to it, right? And the fact that these physical vibrations can alter how your brain is electrically firing and then change the chemistry of your body. To me, that is the most magical thing in the world, right? That I can make sounds, alter certain sounds, and now just completely change the physiochemistry of your body. You know what I mean? And that's where it's just phenomenal. Like that physics is happening there.
Right.
And being able, being a musician, being able to kind of manufacture that. It's like, oh, I want people to feel this.
Right.
So I'm going to use this chord and do this sort of thing. And it's just phenomenal. I always kind of joke that like musician and magician sound really similar for a reason, right? Because to me, again, it's like a magical experience that you can just alter your mood, right? With just putting on, I can play one chord, and then that'll happen. The music will happen, right? So sound will happen. I thought I silenced my phone.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think I have this problem. I like to pick on the younger generation for this, but I have the same problem. I could never listen to a whole song completely.
Yeah?
I skipped a song in probably 30 seconds, even when like it was not being engineered that way.
Right.
Even when I used to play the guitar, my dad used to be pissed at me because I would learn the intro for a song and then just drop it. I'll be like, oh, I know the song, and then change it.
Yeah. When I first started playing, I was a really big fan of like the music that was more of a journey. Like I used to like when I was younger, I would put on a song and I would just lay down. I'd put on like a CD or an album, as they call it, and like just lay there and just feel it and like take it from end to end. Because at the perspective of music being an art form, it's like this is what they curated. You know what I mean? It's like a painting. Like if you look at a painting, you see the image initially and you're like, oh, okay, like this is what's happening in the image, right? But then you start looking at the brush strokes and you start looking at the foreground and you start looking at like the little details, and then you start to really take in the image at a deeper level, right? And I think the same thing happens with music. You can have, a funny thing is like using we're talking about music in a very utilitarian kind of way, like that I'm using it for a specific means.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's an expression of self and it's an art form. And people are trying to convey something. You know, if they're not making formulaic, music, they're trying to give an idea. And the curious part about music is music can, start revolutions. Music can be the voice of a generation.
Right.
Music can bring people together. And it can really express, I think there's like that saying that's like the artist reflects the times that they're in. So there's a whole really big avenue of just art in general, and how music can really like catalyze that and grow that. So I used to sit there and listen to like Led Zeppelin albums and Pink Floyd albums and just listen from end to end and just feel where it takes you
Right.
as a journey, and I think there's like a kind of element, and this is maybe why music is kind of taken into a divine nature, because it's like it'll just you surrender to it, you let it take you somewhere, and I think that is a beautiful process in and of itself.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like I meet a lot of people who are just like they don't get the same thing about music.
Mm-hmm.
They don't listen to music. They're like, oh yeah, we don't need music.
Right.
And I just think like, what are they missing out on life?
And
But then those are the people I've met who are like super heavy into like art, and that's something I'm not into.
Right, visual art.
Yeah, visual art.
Right.
And then I think like, okay, it's possible. Like there is that component of them that is going into that, and it's possible that if I don't look at art and they look at art the same way I look at music. So I was like,
it's interesting. I think that it depends on what sense you're like locked into. Some people just have more of a visual brain,
right.
So visual things naturally just engage them more. So even like if you're taking auditory stimulus, like for me, I know I'm an auditory person. Language is really big for me. Music is really big with me. I got big with like linguistics and like language and understanding like how to speak properly and fluently and like building my vocabulary, because it was an auditory person. I mean, it could argued because you write it and whatever, right? That language is kind of multisensory, but you hear about people having like visual memory, right? That you have a pictographic memory, like you have like you can picture something in your mind, and that would just literally be like the dominance of visual perception in your brain versus the dominance of auditory perception, right? And which one you kind of steer towards. And some people are athletes. They're tactilely and motor function, what we call a kinesthetic sense. So if that's very strong, you become an athlete, all these things are trainable, right? I would argue to a high degree, but your initial preference, which one you like, sets the course for potentially your whole life.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, for sure.
It is very like, I think if I had to think about why I like music, it was probably my dad introducing me to all the greats, the Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, the ones you mentioned.
Yeah.
He was the one who got me into everything. I think it's just like branched off of it. Like I've gone into like modern pop, rap, and everything. But what you said, initial part of it, it has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So what is your take on lo-fi beats? It's kind of taking over everywhere.
I love it.
Do you think it helps you focus?
It does. Yeah. There's a couple studies, just to speak at it from an academic level, there's a couple studies that like looked at background music and whether it helped performance, and it did. But it was also cross-correlated with personality types, which means that it worked for some people and it didn't work for other people. Which is curious, because this was just like they just gave, I don't know the specifics of what the music was in the study, but it wasn't self-selected. It's like these people didn't pick the music. So some people probably, it was like, oh, that music is nice. And some people who are maybe low on the neuroticism spectrum, right, enjoyed relaxing, calm music, right? And maybe people who are high in neuroticism, they're like, this is boring. I don't want to, you know what I mean? That sort of thing. So if their brain, so personality traits, right, will again, as we said before, like preference and those sorts of things, who you are, will make you susceptible to liking or not liking certain things. But I love lo-fi beats.
No, so you're cool. Saying that if I was the kind of like neurotic person, right, which I feel like I am, but if I was trying to focus on something, more neurotic music would help me focus?
Potentially.
Okay.
It depends on the type of task. There's
Let's say it's a cognitive task of like me trying to read a
yeah,
book.
I mean, some people could like listen to metal and do work. You know what I mean? I used to be one of those people. I used to put on like a heavy song and just be like, all right, I'm gonna bang this out, like bang, 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 and I'll put like a song on that like, you know, just is cool to me. So you can kind of self-select and put on music, but again, it depends on like what means to an end. Like if you're a neurotic person, you put on music that's soothing, it can help you. Obviously,
It
like
can?
it can help you get out of a neurotic state.
Okay.
Right. But also, if you want to kind of parallel that state of mind and reinforce that state of mind, you can play something that's a little more elevated. And this happens like in a feedback sense, right? So there's a couple studies with vision and with auditory stimuli where you can actually reinforce people's brainwave patterns and make them perform better.
Okay.
They've done this with visual pulses. So they'll actually measure the alpha wave of your brain, right? Which is a specific hertz range, 4 to 7 hertz. And maybe yours is at like, your alpha range is like, at the moment is like 6.42, right?
Okay.
And they will literally program a light to flash at that frequency. And when they do that and they give you like cognitive tasks, you actually perform better. And the interesting thing is that now if I give you this, so you're like, okay, well, maybe the light is just stimulating the nervous system. But if you give it off phase or out, like not the same rhythm. So if I give you like a 5 hertz and your brain is at 6,
right,
it'll actually make you perform worse. Right. So it's super weird how we can actually, this is hyper specific, right? In terms of like we measured it scientifically and then fed that rhythm back to them. And then it enhanced their cognition, their ability to do cognitive tasks. And they've done it with rhythm too. Right. So if I mirror a frequency, a pulse, that,
okay,
right? I don't know if the people can hear that, but like, you know, you have like, to say like something like 3 hertz is easy to do, right? Because 3 hertz is 3 times per second. So how you count a second is 1 Mississippi. One Mississippi is 4 syllables.
Sounds like 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'd be 4 hertz. 1, 2, 3, 4. In a second, right? So that's very easy. So anything between 4 and 7 is not hard to emulate in an auditory sense. And then again, if we mirror people's rhythms back to them, it enhances their ability, which is insane.
So if I had to like sit down and work right now, how do I know what kind of music is good for me?
I don't know. Figure it out. I think in that case, you have to do some self-experimentation.
Okay.
And again, it depends on the means. Like if you have something, there's like a performance curve. Like if something is a very high cognitive load, if it's a very difficult task, it's better to have something that's actually soothing. If it's something that's easy and like, you know, really kind of like maybe repetitious, it's good to have chaotic music because it keeps your mood elevated while you're doing something that's potentially boring, right? But there's a curve there. Like literally, the higher the cognitive load, the kind of more you want to downplay the stimulus, right? Because if I have to really focus on something, I don't want music that's going to distract me, and then like I'm going to start grooving, and then like, you know what I mean? It depends. It depends on how strong or how difficult that task is versus the type of music you want to use.
So what about something like someone who's not neurotic? I've seen a lot of people who like really cannot even do anything. They can't listen to any sort of rock or like metal is like something that's even extreme for me. If they want to work, how do they do it without like, say if they go to the gym, right? It's probably like a repetitive task, right? You're not really doing anything that's high cognitive.
Yeah.
Would they be better off listening to more upbeat music and that kind of stuff?
Potentially. Again, it's a personality thing.
Right.
Music is heavily psychological.
Okay.
So whatever reinforces what you're trying to do, you have to kind of self-experiment, I would say to some extent. But there are people, again, who can be overwhelmed. They can go to the gym, and even the gym has music, right? Like the gym will have music over the loudspeaker or whatever. And some people get like overwhelmed by that environment. Right, it's just a lot of clanking and a lot of things. You know, I had a friend of mine who had like a sensory overload issue, like where if he went to somewhere where there was a lot of clanking or there was a lot of like noises, you would just freak him out.
You should go to Planet Fitness.
Right. So, you know what I mean? It's one of those things that's really personal.
Yeah.
You can eventually, again, potentially train yourself out of that, like exposure therapy and those sorts of things. Like if you do the exposure things, and we mentioned, you know, mindfulness before this podcast, and we were talking about that briefly. So like if you use a practice of mindfulness and you put yourself in a space where you can kind of create that separation, right, between yourself and the stimuli, and keep yourself in a calm state of mind and a mood, through actively facilitating a practice, you can then tolerate the presence of maybe a lot of sensory information or sensory overload, right? To the point where if you do that repeatedly, your brain will now associate, right? As we talked about memory before. Now those things are happening. I went to the gym, it was loud and I was fine. So now all of a sudden that will slowly extinct the fear response. And then all of a sudden now your brain is like, oh, this is normal. I'm just at the gym, it's just loud. Right. So again, the brain works in association. So if you can have that good mood state and then go into somewhere that might be a little overwhelming, your brain will then eventually will stop sending the fear signal, because it's like, oh, we did this before, right? And last time we did this, again, your brain's going to self-reference and access memory, right? And then it's going to say, well, last time we did this, it wasn't a problem. So there's no alarm bells, right? Okay. So you just can kind of work in that sense.
That makes sense. And I really like what you said about the mindfulness thing. I want to pick off on that because it says that the World Health Organization actually recognizes music therapy as a legitimate intervention now. And like Spotify also has like an official wellness playlist, I believe. You think like with stress, ADHD and everything, you think music's going to help?
Stress, 100%.
Okay.
ADHD is a lot harder to bridge. Definitely. Music is a momentary stimulus, right? Whereas ADHD is a faculty of, it's a deficit of attention, right? But again, if you do deeper methods of neurofeedback, auditory neurofeedback, you can maybe change the way that the brain is functioning, but it'd have to be long and repeated and over time, and in order for the brain to kind of encode a different method of functioning.
So it's a sound that's coming, right? It's not music then.
No, it's just a noise.
Okay.
It's just like I don't know if it's a click or if it's like a band, but it's a noise.
Right.
And the rhythm is really what's doing it.
Okay.
Right. In those experiments specifically. But music therapy is very, very effective. In traditional music therapy, the therapist will often get the client or the patient involved. So they'll play, and a lot of music therapists, they'll work with children, they'll work with like geriatric patients, they'll work with people of that nature, because often they're the ones that need a lot of help. But, music therapy prevents the decline of cognition in Alzheimer's. But again, they're getting people involved actively, right? As I said before, it globally activates the brain, right? Auditory perception, motor perception. So a sound therapist can go there and literally just strum the guitar, but they'll give like a maraca to like an old person, and they'll just kind of go with it and synchronize. Maraca is just like a little thing. It's like those hollow things that shake. And
okay. The person who doesn't know how to play anything, we give it to them.
Yeah, right? You just give them that, or you give them a drum just to kind of like tamper on the rhythm. And what they're doing is they're syncopating their like motor rhythms with an auditory stimulus. They're literally jogging their nervous system, right? Okay. It's like taking your brain to the gym to some extent, and then there's degrees of how much involvement you want to get. But with people who have Alzheimer's or things like that, or dementia, it prevents a lot of cognitive decline, because it's like taking your brain to the gym, right? When you get involved with music like that.
So you'd say like it's more of a prevention, or is it like a
It's not treatment? Prevention, it's a treatment. At this point, but it could be used for prevention. Learning the piano or learning an instrument actually also increases, because again, when you're playing piano, motor activation, you have to memorize, right? You're learning a scale pattern or like a pattern to play, right? And then you're hearing it and you're like, oh, does that sound good, or did I do that right? You might error correct, right? Based off, it's like, oh, that doesn't sound like that wasn't it, right? And then you're error correcting, right? You're memorizing the line, you're coordinating hands, right? And when you're coordinating the motion of your hands with the feedback of, like, there's deeper brain regions, the basal ganglia, that are involved in the coordination of movement. And those are very deep brain areas. And they just, again, really jog the nervous system. And it can be a method of prevention potentially. I'm not directly familiar. I haven't read directly a study that talked about prevention. But it's definitely in the sense of, and I'm talking about like, okay, you're 40, right? Start learning music now, and then like follow those people for 30 years. And like, if I give 100 people, make 100 people learn piano, and 100 people just keep living, do your thing, right? What's the percentage of Alzheimer's in those groups, right? That would be a good way to kind of run that experiment. And then you say, is the percentage of Alzheimer's or percentage of development of those sorts of disorders lower in the group that learned music? right? That sort of thing. So I don't know I'm not too sure. There might be studies that have done that. I don't know off the top of my head if those have been done, but there's a lot done with people who already have those disorders and preventing decline.
I feel like
as
music,
a treatment, I should say.
Right. I mean, it's sort of like a modern day meditation, is what I think.
Yeah.
And I think like learning an instrument and like the way you explained it with the cognitive, I think with Alzheimer's, or like not to get too deep into what it is, but like with all of these brain related diseases, it's just about keeping your brain active.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And music is like a good part. Like, not, are you saying only listening to it will help, or just like both, like learning an instrument?
No, I'm talking about like really learning an instrument, because learning an instrument will prevent cognitive decline. But also, again, music therapy, which again often has the patient get involved with the music, is a way of, again, just jogging those neural systems to again, just like taking your brain to the gym. It's really interesting. Two musicians who are playing together, their brainwaves will synchronize.
Right.
So it's it's very interesting from a scientific perspective, and from even just like a woo-woo, like, whoa, our brainwaves are syncing, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, even from that perspective, it's like, oh, that's really interesting and very cool. Like,
sounds like a really bro way of talking about it.
Yeah.
Bro, it's syncing.
It's crazy, man.
Yeah. Have you heard of this thing that's been going around? It's called AI.
No, what is that? Is that no?
No, it says that AI is. I mean, have you heard of those songs? I've heard of this.
Yeah.
They played it on Rogan's podcast recently.
Okay.
I think it was 50 Cent's lyrics with a blues guy singing.
Oh,
and
I have
it
seen
sounded
some of those.
so good.
I have seen some of those like emulations where they'll take a song and make it in a different genre and stuff like that. Yeah, it's really interesting. When you voice emulation, right? You can do that, and then you can manufacture a song. It's all just sound waves.
You think like creativity is gonna go down the drain?
If we don't exercise it,
right,
use it or lose it. So I think the same thing with like ChatGPT. Like, if you use ChatGPT to write all your emails, eventually your ability to think will just atrophy because you're not using it. Right? It's one of those things. Like, if I don't do bicep curls, my bicep will not grow, and it won't get stronger. It might get weaker. Use it or lose it. So if you want to, I think AI can be a tool to maybe help develop, right? Just kind of like how the typewriter helped us write faster, rather than having to dip a feather in like a thing and then like scribe stuff, and it takes me like 5 years to write a book or something like that. But then I could voice annotate. I know I've seen things where people just voice annotate and they write books that way. They're like, okay, cool, chapter 1, blah 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 blah, and they'll just boom. So it's a tool. Any form of technology is a tool, but we can't let it atrophy our ability to think and to do things. Right. And I think there's a risk for that, especially being in education, like giving people papers to write. It's like, how do I know they're really writing these papers? Yeah. There's some like things that can detect it, and there's other like things you can make them install that like monitors if they're copying, pasting large chunks and things like that. So you can kind of monitor it. But, if we don't use those muscles, man, they're not going to develop, and if we lose that, it's going to be a huge hit to human history. So I'm a big advocate for doing the work, as much as it sucks.
But think about it this way:
you're making yourself stronger.
Right.
Smarter.
If you think about it, it's not that the people, like, you play the bass guitar, like your instruments, but on the other side, AI is coming with the music already, and it's quicker, it's faster, it's hacking the brain in a different way.
Yeah.
You were coming from the pure artistic point of view, right?
Yeah.
And that's when someone plays some song for me, and if it's good, I'm like, okay, it's good. The minute they say it's AI, I'm never listening to that song again.
Yeah.
Because I think that's just me personally, because I really value the skill, the whole creativity that goes on it.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you say that was the same transition when EDM music came? A lot of people were playing the guitar. They're like, you got calluses on your finger. You got broken bone. I mean, not bones, but like playing the drums, the whole physical effort part of it. Versus on EDM, it was just pressing buttons. Right. It was creativity.
Yeah.
Now it's a different form that's coming. Right.
No, I agree. There was a lot of resistance to electronic music, and it was like, oh, you're not really playing anything, you're not really doing anything. But again, also, I just want to emulate, or just the idea of your faculty. And it's also like, if you have a computer be creative to you, you're not developing a creative mind.
Right.
And you know, some people, and also it's like if it's quicker and it's faster, it's like, does that mean it's better?
Definitely
You know what I
not.
mean? I mean, you're coming from a place which I appreciate as well, is like you're coming from a place of artistic integrity. And also the fact that music is an expression of self. It's an expression of a person and an artist that reflects the times. And sure, you can make an AI like emulate that, right? But at the end of the day, even like live performance, I think is just one of those things where it's just genuine. And when you hear a real human voice, it strikes you in a very different way. You know, when you see somebody really get up on stage and perform and give their heart and soul, like it strikes you in a
Right.
very different way than if someone's just up there, you know, or even if no one's up there, if it's just like music that's just playing whatever from an AI. But for me, you know, I mean, again, it can be a preference thing. But I think I lead a much more interesting life being a musical person and having a musical and creative mind rather than being someone who just experiments with AI. And you could argue that that's creative a little bit, right?
Right.
But again, your agency and your degree at which you can create and the freedom at which you can create. You know, I mean, you're creating music with prompts,
Yeah,
right?
basically.
And then it's like, oh wait, no, but this chord isn't good. And then you can also self-experiment. And there's little minute things that I've noticed too when I perform. My state of mind really comes across, and people's state of mind really comes across. And this is where I think the magic of music sits, because if I'm nervous on stage, my hand is like a millisecond faster or slower.
Right.
But if I'm in sync and in a groove, it's utterly human. And it's just so real and raw that like I don't know if a computer will ever emulate that. You know what I mean? I just think that music is so tied to what the human experience is that I would never want to take that away.
Yeah.
You know, and let people experiment. You know, I mean, if you don't know how to play something, you can add an AI to like teach you chords and stuff like that. And like, oh, hey, I want a chord that like can influence this kind of mood. What would you suggest? Right. And then you learn how to emulate that and play that and experiment with that. And then also the thing is too, is AI is trained off of what already exists.
Yeah.
So,
Where's the creativity?
right. And how to be innovative and like the next music genre, you know, where is it going to come from? And the funny thing is it always comes from like the heart and soul of people, you know, reflecting their human experience. I think that's what music does for us. You know, enhances the human experience, reinforces our moods and all sorts of things. But yeah.
I hope that doesn't go away. Like,
yeah, no, I mean,
I was sad when the whole DJ movement came out. I love it now, but that's what I feel. Maybe 10 years from now.
And the funny thing is, like, I've played with DJs. I've done shows in Brooklyn, like where a DJ will spin and I will literally shred with it and like play and rip the bass like over top of what a DJ does.
Yeah.
And it gives it so much more of a live energy. It's like, oh man, he's playing like while a DJ, you know what I mean? Just there's so much more just gusto and energy and like
people value the craft.
Yeah. You know, 100%.
Yeah. It's the same thing as like someone selling an art painting, like a visual painting.
Right.
And it's like if it's AI, like it's not gonna go for that much.
It's like the print or the painting, right? Do you want to buy the painting, or you want just like the digital print of the you know, whatever.
Same goes with clothes. Like everyone's like, oh, this is handmade.
Right.
Suddenly the price goes up.
Yeah. It was human energy, human effort, and I think that goes a long way.
Daniel, when I saw your profile, you've called yourself Self-Perpetual, right? And you run a program,
right,
which is called Self-Perpetual.
Yeah.
What is that?
So Self-Perpetual is actually a really complex term that I came up with. But it basically says that who we believe ourselves to be is who we become in a nutshell, right? So for example, like, as I was mentioning before, when we identify ourselves, like who we are, oh, I'm this person because this, and this, right? We choose to hold on to moments of time, which then reinforce the ego identity, right? So if I choose to believe that these moments are important to me, I'm going to reinforce them right now, right? If I cling on to the idea that I'm a professor and I do this and blah, 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 right? Or if I came in here like thinking like, oh, I'm a rock star and I play music and I do this, right? So depending on the moments that I identify with, that's who I'm going to embody in that moment. And that's a cycle, right? So then who you embody in that moment, right, then further influences the things that happen, right? So then that becomes this perpetual cycle, right, which I call like the self-perpetual cycle. So it's kind of like the energy that you put in, the output, and then the feedback, right? It's this loop, and it's perpetual. Another way to maybe phrase it is like it's like a psychological momentum, right? And one of the big things is I like to say that there's many points of entry, right, into this mind-body system. I have this momentum we mentioned before, again, living in a reactionary or reactive state. I can stop my body and do yoga. Right? I can, take some magnesium or some B12 and maybe or creatine, I think we were mentioning before the podcast, right? It changes your brain function, right? So I can attach it from my biology. I can then maybe read something in my environment might spike a stimuli. So that could work, right? But there's many points in how we alter that psychological momentum, but it's really important to be mindful of how those things, specific stimuli, affect us and affect who we are in the moment and who we become over long periods of time, right? And then kind of self-selecting that, facilitating ourselves with that awareness.
No, I really, really like what you just said, because I was listening to the podcast with Robert Greene in Diary of a CEO, the guy who wrote the 48 Laws of Power.
Right.
He was talking about 50 Cent, and he was saying that everyone has different roles in their own lives. Like, he's saying that when you meet 50 Cent, you'd expect him to be all like thug, right? He's the sweetest guy ever. That's what he said.
He's a businessman too.
He's
very smart.
Really good businessman.
Yeah.
I think he did get bankrupt, but let's not get into that.
I just heard him talking about like how he like invested his money or something, and I don't know.
Right, but like then he was talking about his feud with Kanye, and he was saying that there was a whole different character that he was playing. Look at yourself. Like right now, you're gonna go after this. You're like in podcast, like intellectual mode.
Right.
After this, you're gonna go completely creative mode. You're going for a gig. I'm here for a podcast. I'm in my whole zone in mode. I gotta listen everything you say. I gotta understand everything. And is that what self-perpetual is? You have different parts of you that act up in different areas that you need to.
Yeah, definitely.
Channel.
I mean, there's roles. There's a big thing with psychology too, like in terms of the roles that we play. In a family structure, like the role that we play at this moment, right? Depends again how we act. If you go home and now you're in the role of like, if you see your parents, right, and now you're in the role of a son, and how do you act as a son, or how do you act as a father, or how do you act as a friend, right? How do you act as a lover? How do you act as a musician or a professional, right? Those roles that we're embodying alter us by nature. We alter each other all the time. I mean, again, the fact that the physics of the sound waves that are coming out of my mouth and yours, like we're altering each other's brain chemistry right now.
Right.
And whether or not we are conscious of that propagation of this psychological momentum, we can let it be reactionary, or we can choose our words much more delicately, right, if we so choose. I think that all plays a role in what role we embody. But yeah, I think one of the big things I like to say is that humans are the holders of time.
Right.
That I hold on to this moment. I'm this person because this, and this happened, right? Or, and again, it can be positive, it can be negative, right? And, this is an early experience I had, and that's why I'm this way. Okay. And we choose, as much as it is hard to accept, we choose to cling to that moment, because we can cleanse that out of our system if we so choose, right, as well. Right. But it's part of the story, and my ego is attached to it. And I can't let that go because that's who I am, right? And this is where you get into those ideas of like transcendence, that you can transcend the things that were before you. You can transcend aspects of yourself, right? And that kind of active curation of who you are. There's this really interesting saying from a musician. There's a song, and he says, we are not, I'm going to butcher it. John Gom, Passion Flower is the song, but there's a lyric in that song where he says something along the lines of like, you are not who you are who you become, right? And it gives this idea of like the trajectory. It's like, you're not where you've been, like you're becoming, you're in the constant state of becoming, right? And that is the arrow of time, and where you kind of, I guess, you could say you have conscious choice, and your root of your consciousness is in the moment, right? All mindfulness practices talk about the moment of now. Right, and being in the now, because that's where you can maybe change direction if you so choose, or do nothing if you so choose.
It's your choice.
Yeah.
So Daniel, do you have any questions for me?
I think I asked a lot of them before the podcast. I was asking you how you got into podcasting. I know you went to NYU.
Yeah.
All sorts of cool things like that, and you picked up the guitar. So I feel like I asked you a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Something maybe the viewers could be interested in. What was the first song you learned?
was the first song I learned. Smoke on the Water.
Nice.
That was the easiest one to start with.
Yeah, that's a fun one. Yeah, I think there's like another. What's that?
Seven Nation Army.
Yeah, that's another
Yeah.
chill riff to learn first.
That's never getting old.
Yeah. And you learned piano as a kid.
I started with it for 6 months. I was forced into doing, like I said, that if I could pick up the guitar, I got to show my commitment to the piano. So the only reason I picked up the piano was so that I could get the guitar.
Yeah.
That worked.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So Daniel, as part of this podcast, we have a closing tradition. Whatever you've spoken about today, I'd love it if you could leave some advice for the audience. Tune in.
So, I mean, in regards to maybe what we're speaking about, music and expression, I would say don't let anybody dim your light. If you have a goal, an idea, a creative vision, something an art that you're trying to get at, dive into that and don't let anybody else kind of tell you what you can and can't do. Feed into your passion, fuel your passion, creatively facilitate that in ways that you can. And don't let anybody stop you. You know, if you really have a vision and a goal, hit it, emphasize it, go for it. And that's like what I say.
Awesome. That's really good advice. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Awesome.